All right, everybody. Welcome back to day 3 of our Midwest Bridge Preservation Partnership. And this morning's session is bridge preservation. It's bridge management and preservation. It doesn't say on this sheet. But anyway, to get started, Dick Dunne, my friend Dick Dunne here, is going to go over a case study on bridge preservation programs. And I think you have panel members? No, presentation first.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dick Dunne. I'm the National Director for Bridge Preservation for GPI. Before I joined GPI, I was the State Bridge Engineer for New Jersey. So I've been working with NCPP and the TSP2 bridge preservation stuff since it formed. I was actually at New Jersey DOT. So I'm really pleased to be here to talk to you all. And this is a case study we're working on for FHWA. It talks about a kind of a idealized bridge preservation program for a state. If you ever look at the bridge preservation guide that FHWA has on their website, they have what we kind of commonly refer to as the pinwheel diagram, which kind of shows you the process for a bridge preservation program for a state. So what we're doing in this case study is we're collecting information from the states for each one of those steps, so that when you look at this, it's going to be kind of a hypothetical bridge preservation program that's, kind of a Frankenstein, if you will, from all the states' best practices or commendable practices. And so that's where we are. I'm more than willing to entertain anybody who wants to get involved with this in terms of giving me what you're doing in your state, so I may be calling on you. But as we go through this today, the three of the states that I've kind of contacted and relied on heavily so far for the case study that I've been developing have been in the Midwest, Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. So you'll see some examples from what they're doing, and we will, later on after my presentation, we'll hear from Michigan and Minnesota more in depth. So you'll hear some firsthand things that I'll just touch on briefly in my presentation. So the first step in any bridge preservation program starts with having objectives that are, meaningful and measurable. And Wisconsin, and actually, most of the states that I've talked to, they say basically they want to maintain their states they maintain their bridges in a state of good repair. So, they establishing some goals, and then monitoring their progress towards their goals, and optimizing the benefits and effectiveness of their long-term maintenance investments decisions. So step 2 is a selection process in terms of how do you select the bridges to preserve. So Minnesota DOT has this Bridge Investment Advisory Committee, and they use their bridge management plan to basically select their bridges. Other states that I've come across that have really good selection procedures are listed there. And like I said, I'll say this many times during the presentation, if you want to talk to me after this session or drop me an email, I definitely would consider your state to include in this case study that we're working on. So step 3 is the actions for preservation. And luckily for me, there's the AASHTO Guide for Bridge Preservation Actions, which is a wealth of knowledge. This is just one page out of the table of contents for this guide, and there are several more pages cataloging bridge preservation actions in this guide. So if you don't have this, I would highly encourage you to get this. It's a great resource. Next step is the rules. What are the rules for when you make your preservation decisions? This is an example from Michigan DOT for what they want to do with decks with uncoated black rebar. So essentially this is, depending upon the rating that you have, what should be your action, whether it's seal it, epoxy overlay, what should be your action based on the condition of your bridges. So this is a really good, this is right out of their design manual. I guess it's a design manual there, right? Yeah. Yeah, their design manual. And so then they have, the explanation. behind this, right, is exactly when you make your decisions and what does everything mean in there. Then they have a similar one for when you have epoxy-coated rebar. So again, these are the rules that they follow when they're coming up with their preservation actions for their preservation program. So this is a couple pages out of that AASHTO guide. So again, this is another resource for you all to use if you're looking for, what kind of rules you can use or rules you can set for when you want to take preservation actions and what preservation actions you want to take. This would be a resource for you. And then I put a bunch of these in here, not knowing, everybody can have a look at this on their own time, and you can see how different states do things differently. So you'll see here, these are the Minnesota rules for when they have, when they want to take action, and what they, how often they do them, right? Annually, every 3 to 5 years, every 5 years. So those are the types of things that you want to put in your rules when you develop your bridge preservation program for your state. Next up is the discussion about life cycle plans. And this is a big one for states to do because this is a key part of every state's TAMP is having life cycle plans. So we have a couple good examples that we found for Michigan and Caltrans. And then there's a couple other resources here I list from NCHRP. They have a guide for incorporating costs into the TAMP. So these are some of the ideas that you could use to do life cycle planning. And there'll be references in here to TAMPs so that you can understand where the connection comes from with your bridge preservation program and your TAMP, right? That's always a good thing to have. I mean, it helps secure the funding that we all need to do our bridge preservation actions. Next up are the performance measures. I said that before, that you have to have, good goals and objectives, but you also have to have measurable performance measures. Measurable, yeah, I guess that's kind of redundant, but you have to have performance measures. And essentially right now for most states, their performance measures are what are required in their TAMP. But when you drill down into some of the policies and some of the other things like the Michigan information about their decks, you find out that they actually have performance measures on those items as well. So there's some good examples. There's going to be some good examples in this case study on performance measures. Florida's got some information in there from their turnpike condition where it's condition-based, outcome-driven, and provides value. And so they show you what the condition states are, what their goals are, and what the defects are that they're looking at. I note that Minnesota DOT also uses some FHWA requirements on geometrics, load carrying capacity, and they include culverts in what they're doing. So again, like I said, there's a lot of good information from your states in this Midwest team. So then there's the evaluation of benefits, and this is something that's very difficult for most states to do. So that's why, it's a key thing in here, and I've tried to find states that are doing a good job with this, but it's also something that if you have a way that you're identifying the benefits of your bridge preservation program, please feel free to drop me a note, because this is something that if we can show the benefit of what we're doing, we'll be able to get the money that we need to maintain our bridges in a state of good repair. And that's the next step, right, is what are your funds? What are your needs, and how do you define them? And once you've defined your needs, then what are the options for you for bridge preservation? How do you do that? I know my state in New Jersey, we had several funding categories in our capital program that were just individual line items that were listed just as they are right here, bridge deck and superstructure replacement. And it was just a line item, and then we were able to selectively fill that line item with the bridges that were determined based on our bridge management system and our bridge preservation action plan, what bridges we should do that on. And in our case, in New Jersey, they were either cyclical, we had some that we were doing every year, and then there were others that were basically condition-based. So again, you want to look at where you can get your funds from. So we're going to talk about that, how in the case study, like what's available from states using state funds, federal funds, and now there's the new funding categories from federal highway that we're going to have to include with the new funds available. And then step 9 is the bridge preservation project implementation. And this is, we're looking at how states implement their bridge preservation program. A lot of states use standard traffic control plans, standard contract language, so we're going to be collecting that and sharing that information in this case study so that you can get an idea of how you can present bridge preservation actions that will be biddable projects for contractors, because if it's too small, you don't necessarily get a lot of contractors, and if it, you got to be careful of, what the geographical area is of the bridge preservation actions that you want to include in a project. So again, this will be all types of different ways that states are implementing their bridge preservation projects. And, getting near the end of the steps, you want to monitor and measure the performance, right? This goes back to, how do you show your benefits? This is another way of showing your benefits. This is the performance of your bridges, not necessarily a financial thing, but it kind of links to the finances. And this is a chart that's from Michigan. Again, like I said, it's a lot of folks in the Midwest were part of the early part of this case study for me, where they were able to show by putting funds towards preservation, it resulted in a decline of the number of poor bridges. So, what you don't see on this graph is, while they're using a lot of money on, a fair amount of money on bridge preservation, they're also replacing bridges. So as those bridges come off the poor list, then the bridges in the fair condition aren't dropping into the poor. And so that's what they were showing with this graph. Minnesota also has an interesting shot here. This is right out of their dashboard, where they show what the benefits are of their bridge preservation program, how they're reporting it. So again, these are just a couple of ideas on the bridge preservation case study that we're going to be developing for federal highway. There are a couple other things. Indiana has got a very simple reporting system that's shown online. So again, I'm looking for other states that might have a way to reassess their goals and objectives from step 1, because this is basically the last step of that pinwheel diagram. So essentially, you're looking at, as you get all the way through this, now you're reporting the benefits and the improvements to your system, and then do you need to reassess what you're doing the following year. So essentially, being quick because I'm the last day, and I appreciate people hanging in there. That's my presentation. Thank you so much. And again, like I said, I'm here and I'm willing to entertain anything that you might want to add. Let's get
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.